The funny thing about BBQ is that people usually talk about the smoke, the rub, or the sauce first. But the real story starts way before any of that. It starts with the cut itself, a slice of brisket that bends without falling apart, ribs that pull cleanly from the bone, sausage that gives you that little snap, pulled pork that falls into soft strands. Those are not just different things on a menu. They are completely different meat structures reacting to heat in completely different ways. So before we talk about which BBQ meats are the best, subscribe if you like food explained fast. Because once you understand the cut, the fat, and the time, BBQ starts to look a lot less random. At the center of BBQ, there are four big forces working together: fat, collagen, smoke, and time. Fat gives the meat that rich, juicy, mouth-coating feeling that makes one bite feel bigger than it looks. Collagen is the tougher connective tissue that can slowly soften when the heat is gentle enough for long enough. Smoke adds that deep aroma, but smoke alone cannot rescue meat that has been cooked badly. And time is where things get tricky, because the same long cook that turns one cut tender can push another cut straight into dry and chalky. That is why great BBQ is not just low and slow as a catchy phrase. It is knowing which meat needs patience, which meat needs protection, and which meat should never be treated like brisket. Brisket is the cut that makes BBQ feel almost like a transformation trick. Before it is cooked, it is not exactly delicate or glamorous. It is dense, heavy, and built from a part of the cow that worked hard. That is why it can feel so tough at the start. But that same toughness is what makes the payoff so satisfying when it is handled properly. Over a long cook, the structure starts to loosen, the fat softens through the meat, and the outside builds that dark, peppery bark people obsess over. A good slice of brisket should bend, glisten, and pull apart with light pressure, but it should still hold together long enough to feel like a real slice. That rich luxury bite is not just meat being cooked, it is a tough cut being slowly turned into something completely different. But not every BBQ meat is supposed to stay neat and sliceable. Pulled pork works almost the opposite way. It is not trying to look clean, elegant, or perfectly carved. It is supposed to become soft, messy, and easy to pull into strands that catch smoke, fat, and sauce in every bite. That usually starts with pork shoulder, which has enough internal fat and connective tissue to survive a long cook without drying out too quickly. As the heat works through it, the meat stops acting like one solid roast and starts separating along its natural seams. That is why pulled pork feels so right in a sandwich under crunchy slaw or with a sharp sauce cutting through the richness. It is not built for presentation in the same way brisket is. It is built for texture, sauce, and big, satisfying bites. But ribs follow a completely different rule. Ribs are where BBQ gets a little more surprising because fall off the bone sounds like the dream, but it is not always the best sign. Great ribs should be tender, smoky, juicy, and easy to eat, but they should still give you something to bite into. If the meat collapses the second you pick it up, it might be soft, but it can also lose that satisfying rib texture. The magic is in the balance: connective tissue that is softened, fat that is rendered, a smoky or sticky surface, and meat that pulls cleanly from the bone without turning mushy. That is the part many people miss. Ribs are not just about tenderness. They are about controlled resistance, that clean bite that tells you the meat still has structure. And sausage takes the whole idea of BBQ structure in an even stranger direction. Smoked sausage is the BBQ meat that feels the most designed, because in a way, it is. With brisket or ribs, you are working with the natural structure of a whole cut. With sausage, that structure has already been changed. The meat is ground, mixed with fat and seasoning, then packed into a casing before it ever reaches the smoker. So the goal is not to slowly break down tough fibers like a big roast. The goal is balance. The casing gives you that snap when you bite in. The fat melts just enough to keep the inside juicy, and the smoke wraps around the whole thing with that salty, spicy aroma. A great smoked sausage should feel springy, not crumbly, and rich without turning greasy. It is BBQ designed from the inside out. But lean meats are much less forgiving. Turkey breast, chicken, and pork loin are the cuts that show you the risky side of BBQ. They look clean, simple, and maybe even lighter than the heavy, fatty cuts, but That is exactly why they can be harder to cook well. They do not have as much internal fat, they do not have as much collagen waiting to soften, and they do not give you much room for error. During a long cook, these cuts can move from juicy to dry much faster than people expect. That is why they often need help from brining, careful timing, sauce, or smart slicing. The slightly shocking part is that the BBQ that looks healthier or cleaner can actually be more difficult to get right. It needs protection, not just smoke. On the other side of the smoker, some cuts are loved for the exact opposite reason. They are rich, fatty, and completely unapologetic. Pork belly, burnt ends, and beef ribs are the BBQ cuts where fat becomes a huge part of the experience. Pork belly gives you those soft, almost buttery layers with just enough meat to keep each bite from feeling like pure fat. Burnt ends are built around contrast: darker edges, sticky seasoning, a smoky surface, and a tender center that feels rich the moment you bite into it. Beef ribs take that same idea and make it bigger, heavier, and more dramatic, with smoke, salt, and rendered fat making each bite feel almost oversized. That is why these cuts are so craveable. They are not just tender, they are built around contrast: soft against firm, smoky against fatty, rich against deeply browned edges. But once BBQ leaves the smoker and becomes a restaurant plate, the story changes again. At a restaurant, BBQ is no longer only about the meat. It becomes a full product. The portion has to look generous. The bark has to look dark, serious, and expensive. The sauce adds shine, sweetness, acidity, and that feeling that the tray is overflowing with flavor. Then the sides do more work than people realize. Pickles cut through the fat. Slaw adds crunch and freshness. Bread catches juices. Mac and cheese makes the whole plate feel heavier, creamier, and more indulgent. This is why BBQ looks so good online. A huge rib, glossy brisket slices, a pile of pulled pork, and a tray packed with sides instantly signal value. It feels abundant before you even taste it. But that is also where the hidden truth comes in. The BBQ that looks the most impressive is not always the bite you will enjoy most. So the real hidden truth of BBQ is that best does not mean the softest, the biggest, or the most viral piece on the tray. BBQ meats are different texture experiences. Brisket is for slicing. Pulled pork is for pulling. Ribs are for that clean bite. Sausage is for snap. Lean cuts are for balance. Fatty cuts are for richness. Once you understand that, ordering BBQ becomes much easier. You can choose based on what you actually want: smoky and tender, juicy and messy, crisp-edged and rich, or lighter and cleaner. You can also pay more attention to the sauce, the sides, and the portion, instead of letting hype choose for you. BBQ is not just smoke and sauce. It is meat structure, heat, fat, time, and texture working together. And now you know how BBQ really works. Subscribe for the next Food Explained in 10 minutes.